Last Hawk Takes, I told you guys why I genuinely hate the idea of the Seahawks taking a quarterback at 5 and why I don't think they're going to do it. Now, there was some great pushback in the comments, and a lot of it came in the form of two questions that I thought were excellent. And it went a little something like, well, okay then, Captain Smarty Pants, since you seem to think you know so much, what do you think they're actually going to do? And if they're not going to take a quarterback, what would you like them to do? So my prestigious answer to this question was, duh, I don't know, just not that. I think we can all agree that's a weak sauce answer. So let's take the first question today. What do I think the Seahawks are going to do this year at the top of the draft? And let's take John Schneider's history of top picks up in the top 15 and see if that can help us figure out where the Seahawks might go here at 5. Today on Hawk Takes. What up, 12s? Adam here. So, what can John Schneider's top 15 draft pick history tell us a little bit about what he may do here in the future? And there's some interesting tidbits, and we'll get into it for sure. But I think it's important that we start with what I think are goals that we all agree on as 12s and what Pete and John also agree on. So, goal number 1 here. Win another freaking chip under Pete and John. Like, let's get it, man. 1 chip was great. 2 is better. I think we can all agree there. So in the next 2 to 3 years, while they're both under contract here, let's go out and get another chip. So number 2, hit on at least 3 out of 4 of these top picks here. We got 2 in the first, 2 in the second at this point, unless John trades around a little bit, which, he's done in the past for sure. If we're going to catch the Niners, if we're going to overtake the Eagles and be that dominant team here in a weak NFC, hitting on 3 or 4 of these first top draft picks here, that would be huge. And number 3, at pick 5, let's be sure to get somebody at a premium position. And that's something I think we all agree on, whether that's quarterback, tackle, edge, corner, like whatever it is that you think is a premium position. I think we all agree it's important to get a guy there when you have that opportunity, because then you have a guy who plays a position that usually gets paid a ton of money, but you get him on that rookie deal. So super important. Number 4, win forever. Having an eye on the future as well as trying to improve now, right? So we got the idea that we want to win a chip here in the next 2 to 3 years. And I think that's important, right? And we're all on board with that. But equally important is let's make sure this organization is set up for the future. And I think that's where a lot of people are coming from when they're talking about the QB pick. I'm just not sure that's the right way to go, but I get the sentiment. And number 5, all I know is we need to make our defense great again. Last year, sad. Look, I didn't want to put my face on the screen as I did that impersonation because you get the full duck lips and all that stuff, and just look you guys don't need. But fact remains, we should all agree that the defense was the biggest problem that needed to be addressed last year, or from last year, and it would make a huge difference in running this division, getting to the NFC Championship game, and hopefully having a Super Bowl appearance. So let's make the defense great again. So with keeping those goals in mind that I think are universally shared among all the 12s, and I think John and Pete would agree with as well, let's talk about the things that I think I know going into this draft about John Schneider and the way that he operates. And the first thing is that it's almost always a surprise, right? Second thing being that the higher the pick that he makes, maybe the less risky it is. Next thing would be is that every single one of those picks in the top 15, they're usually at a premium position. We'll see if that holds true. Each of these top picks in the top 15 has been when quarterback wasn't necessarily settled for the team. Again, we'll see if that rings true after we look at it a little tighter here. And lastly, that maybe there just weren't any great options at quarterback when they were picking in the first round. That's something that I didn't really think fully through, and I think is interesting as we look at these a little closer. All right, so let's take a look at the pick specifically. 2010 with pick number 6, the highest pick that he's had since this number 5 draft pick here. He takes tackle Russell Okung. I think we all agree that that was an excellent pick. A guy that was a stable, very good starting tackle for a number of years. And then with his next pick at number 14, so just inside the top 15, he picks Earl Thomas. Now, while some won't view safety as maybe like a premium position, I kind of tend to put it close to there, but a lot of people disagree, and I think that's fine. But if it wasn't a premium position, at least he hit on a Hall of Famer, right? So let's take a look at what the quarterback position looked like during 2010 there. And because if you're thinking about this, you're like, all right, they obviously didn't take quarterback. That's true. But what were the options? What did that look like? So the projected starter going into that year was none other than Matthew Hasselbeck. And I love me some Hasselbeck, right? Really great quarterback there for a couple years and got us to the Super Bowl. Good enough to win a Super Bowl, just not good enough to beat two teams in the Super Bowl, the team that was wearing yellow and black, and then also the team wearing white and black. So hats off to Hasselbeck, man, one of my favorite dudes of all time. But he was coming into that season, it just beat up, kind of at the end of his career as an effective starter. And I think we all knew the writing was on the wall with the coaching change, with Holmgren leaving, then Moore, having his disaster year. And then with the incoming of Pete Carroll, that the writing was on the wall for Matt, and he wasn't going to be sticking around for long. So, I think at that time, I was definitely hoping that they would look at quarterback. But again, this kind of goes back to, well, were there really any great options in the draft that year? Well, let's take a look. So first round QBs that year, Sam Bradford, he was actually the number 1 pick. And then none other than Tebow time, Tim Tebow, right? I think he went like 22nd or something like that. Now, if you look at those options, the Rams, they weren't trading out of one that year. They were definitely taking Sam Bradford. It was a slam dunk. He was totally hyped up coming out of college as being one of those dudes, right? That almost a can't miss prospect. They weren't trading out of number 1 and getting out of the Sam Bradford business, especially with the Seahawks, right? So, yeah, we look at it in premium position at tackle, nailed it. Picked Earl Thomas at 14 at a borderline premium position. Maybe we could put it that way, but nails it with a Hall of Famer. He aces it, right? That's a perfect draft. And especially as you look at it through the lens of, hey man, are they rolling with Hasselbeck? Probably, because the first round QBs available to him at that time, not really great options, or not even there to be had. So the next time that John Schneider had an opportunity to pick in the top 15 was 2012. We all know that draft. We love it. It's Seahawks legendary stuff, right? Well, that's usually thought of in terms of Bobby Wagner, Russell Wilson, go on down the list from that draft. And thing is that they weren't the first pick. First pick was none other than Bruce Irvin, right? And this is probably the one that is most controversial in most people's eyes, or at least at the time. Whereas Okung was thought of as one of the top tackles, him going at 6, that makes sense. Earl Thomas was thought of as one of the top safeties, is picked at 14. Makes sense. Nobody really had a big thing with that. Bruce Irvin was kind of one of those borderline picks where a lot of the pundits were like, that's a reach. But if you go back and you look at some of the draft scouting reports, they all kind of say that Bruce was either a late first or an early second round guy. So while a reach, a small reach. So that kind of speaks to that chalkier notion, right? That so far, 3 out of the 4 top 15 picks that he's had kind of go pretty much on par with what other people are thinking. Now, in terms of was a QB situation settled that year? Well, shoot. I mean, we all know it. It's legendary. Again, going into that year, it was Tavares Jackson, Matt Flynn, or Russell Wilson. Those were your options. And I don't think any of us were complete. And that was after the draft, right? With Russ. I don't think any of us were completely sold on, Tavares or Matt Flynn. And we're kind of hoping that maybe they could go out and do something a little different in the draft. And especially picking at 15, maybe you can parlay that with a couple other first rounders, move up, that sort of thing. But they didn't do it. Now, were there quarterbacks available in that draft? Well, it was a big quarterback draft, and there were 4 quarterbacks that went in the first round. Obviously, Luck at 1, RG3 at 2, Tannehill at 8. That still surprises me to this day. I always think of him as going early second, but no, he was at 8. And then Brandon Weeden at 22. So were those great options for the Seahawks in the draft? Well, I mean, kind of, if you're looking at Luck and RG3, right? But here's the thing. they weren't, Washington wasn't trading out of 2 and Indianapolis wasn't trading out of 1. I mean, they were doing the whole suck for luck thing. They just got rid of Peyton Manning. Those guys were unobtainable. I don't care what you threw at them. They weren't trading those picks. So they just weren't an option. Now, Tannehill at 8, could they have gotten to 8 and selected him? Probably. That was probably attainable. But was it the right choice to not to? I would say so. I'm not into Ryan Tannehill. I mean, I respect him, and I'm happy that he had a little resurrection there in Tennessee for a minute, but I just don't think he was a guy that was worth going after. And then we all know that Brandon Whedon just never panned out at all. He's one of the 15,000 names are on the back of that Browns jersey of the quarterbacks they've cycled through over the years. So in terms of was it a surprise? A little bit. Was it fairly chalky? Well, actually, when you look at it, yeah. Was the QB position in peril at that point, or kind of up for grabs? Yeah, and they still didn't go QB, but they didn't go QB. Were there really any good options there? Not really. And I think that kind of bolsters some of the picking a QB at 5 argument just a little bit. So that brings us to last year. They obviously picked Charles Cross at 9, tackle, another premium position, not a quarterback. Was the quarterback position up for grabs last year? Yeah. I was freaking out. I had a huge case of QB FOMO going into that draft, right? Like a lot of people maybe are suffering from this year. So I get the feeling. I genuinely do. I was dead wrong on Geno Smith. Dead wrong. I was like, I know who he is. I've seen him play, back up for the last 10 years and not be able to get on the field. I want to see what Drew Lock has. He's younger, all that stuff. Dead ass wrong. Geno came out and proved me wrong. Pete came out and proved me wrong. But going into that draft, I think most of us as 12s were like, we got to do something, right? We got to draft a guy somewhere. I damn near talked myself into Matt Corral in the second. Like, that's how desperate I was feeling with the QB FOMO. So in this case, does that mean, what does that mean in terms of QBs available, right? It doesn't take a rocket scientist or anybody who's great at doing this to say that last year's class was underwhelming, and there was only the 1 first-round pick, and I don't even know if he belonged there. That was Kenny Pickett. He's been okay for the Steelers, and maybe he'll get better, but I think his limitations are pretty obvious. So did the Seahawks pick a quarterback at 9 in that draft? Nope. They didn't. They didn't pick a quarterback at all. So did they have good options though? Not really. And like I said, I think that does bolster the argument for the people that are for taking a QB at 5. Like, these guys are actually worth it, and we should actually take one of them. I happen to disagree on that evaluation, and I think that's probably where the disconnect comes in. So what did we learn there, and where do I think the Seahawks are going to go with number 5? Well, one of the things that we learned is that the Seahawks have not taken a quarterback with one of their top 15 picks while John Schneider has been there. Now, is that because the quarterback prospects that were available to them were not all that great? Or is it more of a philosophical kind of thing? Well, it's kind of hard to say, because the quarterback position back in 10 and 12 was a little bit more in flux going into that year than it is this year. Obviously, Geno has a stranglehold on the job this year unless something catastrophic happens. So I guess we'll see, but I think it's unlikely that they go QB there. Now, history also suggests that their first cornerstone piece that they take to kind of reset their franchise and get things rolling is a tackle. They did it with Okung, and that turned out great. And now they've just done it with Cross. So hopefully that kind of helps build on that pattern towards a championship. Now, after that, they've gone defense. And I think this is where it makes sense, right? In the ideas of win now and win forever. Because the defense is where we need the majority of our improvement. Now, do I think they're going to go with a safety or somebody like that? Probably not. A borderline premium position? I don't think so. And we're pretty set at, say, safety this year with Adams Diggs and the Julian Love deal. So don't really think they'll be going that way. So that kind of leads me to their next pick that they made in 2012 and Bruce Irvin. That happened to be edge. So a trench player, a premium trench player, right? Guys that don't grow on trees and are usually selected towards the top of the first round. That's what I think John and Pete are going to be looking at. Now, whether that's Anderson, Murphy, Wilson, whoever, I don't know. I don't really evaluate that position very well. So whatever flavor it is that John and Pete like, I think that's the way that they're going to go. But I would almost guess that it is one of those highly ranked guys. Maybe not the number one ranked guy, but the number 2 or number 3, because again, John just doesn't take big swings when he's picking that high in the draft. So that's my prediction. Edge at 5. What say you guys? I'd love to hear about it down in the comments. Agree or disagree? What would you like to see them do? I'm kind of thinking about one thing that I'd like to see them do. I'm going to come at you guys with a video about that later on this week. We also have a ton of great content coming for you guys this week. We're doing a show of What If with Phil the Protector, going through and ranking our confidence in the different position groups along the defense. We did the same thing for offense about a week or so ago. Really cool exercise. We're going to be recording that tonight, so we'll be putting that out for you. Really enjoyable. I think you guys are going to dig it. And we got tons more where that came from, including another flagship show this week. And it just all building up to this draft that I know I have a ton of excitement for. I'm sure you guys do too. I can't wait to see what happens. And I think with that, there's only one thing left to say. Go Hawks.